Hello. This is the fourth of our series on critical realism on dialectic. We hope it'll be useful for you when you're thinking about your levels and indeed your daily life. Dialectic is one of the most complicated ideas, and we're explaining it very simply and briefly here. This is just an introduction. We hope if you're interested, you'll follow up these ideas and study them further. I'm Priscilla Alderson, and I work at University College London.
And I'm Harry Hubbard, an A-level student in Dorset. So I think the first thing we need to do is try and define this big sort of ominous word that's often thrown around a lot. So what do we mean by dialectic? It's the interaction of separate different things. So for example, do rivers shape landscapes or landscapes shape rivers? Well, they continually interact in a dialectic in space and time. So, for example, the geology of the landscape defines where and how the river flows. But the river itself, of course, fundamentally changes and breaks up this geology. However, of course, it's important to iterate this is how separate things interact. So, for example, this cannot be applied to something like salty water. When salt is added to water, it loses its independence, its properties. It stops being dry, for example. In the same way that water also fundamentally changes, it stops being pure. So yeah, it's the interaction of separate different things.
So, do people shape their contexts or are they shaped by them? Students are changed and rechanged by their school, and schools have changed by their students as each year group flows through the school, a bit like a river. So, again, there's a dialectic between people and their context in time and space.
So now I think we're going to sort of track a little bit of the development of the dialectic and its theory, just some sort of the key philosophers that were central to its development. I also think it's important to highlight that the way philosophers define dialectic does change slightly over time, but don't get too bogged down in that. It will sort of become clear, I think, as we go through this. So, Socrates saw the dialectic as a method to search for truth through critical argument. And that was done through exposing other people's mistakes, misbeliefs, and contradictions through respectful, cooperative argument and clear, honest dialogue. So, the method of discussion was the way of understanding the interaction between separate forces, between dialectic. And Socrates did this famously in marketplace discussions and through wine parties.
Dalibus um, identified three stages in dialectic: the thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Uh, the idea, then the disagreements, and then the bringing together again. So, for example, thesis could be school uniforms ensure all students are equal. Antithesis could list lots of gaps and problems with this thesis. And synthesis could arrive at new ideas, insights based on clearer truth.
What Hegel does is apply the dialectic to a much wider context. He doesn't see these interactions merely as between rivers and valleys, but actually between forces and currents within society itself. So he identified that the dialectic and interaction between poor people and the wealthiest in society as one of the key determinants in the development of society. So, for example, this interaction, this dialectic, is what led to the change from the slave-based societies of antiquity, of Rome, for example, to the much more free and democratic societies of today, how we move towards being free and equal citizens. So here we can see why dialectic is so important, that interactions between separate forces can actually define society itself. Now, slightly separately from this point, he used a term that's very important that will come up a lot in sociology, which is to negate negations, which basically means to get rid of problems.
Marx saw dialectic as practical and real, not only abstract dialogue. Dialectic traces interactions and processes in nature, society, and human thought. Human society evolved through our physical interactions in dialectic with the natural world. We started to survive as hunter-gatherers.
Yeah, so looking at an example of this, Marx identifies how humans define land. So where we grow our food, the houses we build them upon, the industry that crops up. But at the same time, land defines humans, what type of food we can eat, where we can build our houses. Um, is there the natural resources in the land for industry to develop? Is there coal? So these two opposite forces lead to mutual development in a unity and conflict of opposites. In a sense, everything is defining everything all of the time, that relationships aren't linear. And that's the key fact.
Another dialectic is nature and nurture. So our nature, our DNA, the double helix, decides, for example, our hair color. But nurture is all our care and education is different and yet interacts throughout all our lives, nature and nurture dialectic.
So now we're going to come to our fourth and final philosopher who, oh, sorry, fifth, in fact, and final philosopher who sort of brings the dialectic into the modern day and adds another stage. So, um, following the method outlaid before, Pascal also includes thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, as explained before. But he adds a fourth and I think crucial stage, which is to act, to change our inner being, which basically identifies that after this process of thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis, we fundamentally change. Um, we adapt based on this new information, and therefore we are no longer the same person. We've changed based on this information when coming to observe and act again. And this is crucial. It means um, we don't basically end up at step one again. So, let's apply this to an example. Students learn from their sixth form subjects. They take A levels. They relate their studies to their daily life and the future world they live in. That's something I hope you do with sociology. But fundamentally and importantly, they are changed by their A-level courses and how they see themselves. And they can apply this A-level experience in their future life and work. They can apply this when they come to observe again, but this can be applied to anything. Your potential arguments with friends may choose how you interact with in future or with relationships, for example.
Now, why does the fourth stage dialectic matter? We'll start by showing the problem when people don't follow the four stages. Many people start and get stuck at stage two, intervene to negate negations, get rid of problems. Dealing with immigrants. So Donald Trump says, build the wall. And Keir Starmer says, stop the boats, smash the gangs. That doesn't work. Build more wall, stop more boats, smash more gangs. That doesn't work. But they keep repeating. Instead, we need the four-stage dialectic.
Yeah, so following on from that, um, stage one, searching for causes. Well, why do people migrate? War and other violence, danger from governments, floods, droughts, hunger, conflict. Most refugee entry is legal, and provided after their after their arrival, people are often allowed to stay here for all these legitimate reasons, of course. So governments respect them and protect many refugees and asylum seekers. Stage two, so after this information, how do we intervene? Upon this information, we decide to set up more legal routes. And then there is almost no need for dinghies and smugglers. And sort of trying to relate this so explicitly to a dialectic. For example, the relationship between government and migration, well, both will benefit. The government is in huge needs of human labor, particularly, for example, in the agricultural sector. So they benefit. And at the same time, refugees and migrants benefit as they're no longer forced to take hugely expensive and hugely dangerous routes through dinghies and small boats.
The third stage, totalities, or to search for the bigger global picture. And again, I must say that we are trying to put very complicated arguments here very briefly, and you'll want to discuss them, no doubt, and maybe disagree with them. And we wish we were with you to follow through all the discussions. So, climate chaos with heat, floods, droughts, famine are going to increase and will in future force billions of people to migrate. Many areas in the world where most people densely live will become uninhabitable. We need to prepare for this. UK services depend on migrant workers. 1 in 5 NHS staff and care workers do not have British citizenship. Good jobs and housing for everyone would help to stop anti-immigrant anger. We need our politicians to take this more global world picture and future picture. And finally, we need everyone, including politicians, but also ourselves, to change from this new knowledge, change our own inner thoughts, fears, and values and hopes. So the aim of dialectic in critical realism is to promote freedom, peace, justice, and prosperity for everyone.
Yeah, so I hope we've not sort of only given you a taste of what the dialectic is, but also why it's so important and how it can be used. There is no closed synthesis to dialectic that the old philosophers imagined. It's not merely causal relationships, but in fact, open-ended and constantly changing. We need research that tracks and connects things over time, learning from past experience and reapplying knowledge gained.
There's some more detailed explanations in these chapters and of this John Molyneux's book. And we do hope you'll be interested to follow up the ideas we've introduced so briefly. And we hope you do very well in your A levels.
Thank you.
Goodbye.